stay in school, so I played Saturday and Sunday when school was in. When school was out, I would go on the road with them.
At 20, he was playing for the New York Giants, where he'd win Rookie of the Year. His first hit, a home run. He would hit 660 of them in his career, ranking 6th on the all-time list. In 1952, he was drafted into the Korean War, serving 2 years. And when he returned, he would thrill fans with an MVP season capped with this moment known as the catch. His back-to-home plate, Mays making one of the most memorable plays of all time. The Giants would win the World Series.
Every time I went on the field, I enjoyed what I was doing. I gave everything I had.
They eventually moved to San Francisco, but years later, Mays returned to New York, finishing his career with the Mets. He was a 24-time All-Star.
It's difficult right now to even try to explain to you how much I love baseball and how much baseball means to me. I think we had what you call a love affair.
Inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1979, and decades later honored by President Obama with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the intensely private Mays credited with breaking barriers.
And his quiet example, while excelling on one of America's biggest stages, helped carry forward the banner of civil rights. It's because of giants like Willie that someone like me could even think about running for president.
But Mays did not live to see another historic tribute. As part of Juneteenth celebrations, he's set to be honored tomorrow at the stadium where he began his career, Rickwood Field in Birmingham, Alabama, where the Giants will play the Cardinals in the first Major League game to be played in that stadium. Overnight, the Giants chairman saying Mays had a profound influence not only on the game of baseball, but on the fabric of America. Willie Mays was 93. He once said he'd like to be remembered as someone who enjoyed people and made a positive influence.
And welcome to the People's Voice. Myself, Pastor Mike, along with my great friend, Chris Otten. How are you today? I just wanted to start off just recognizing a great brother, as the caption is just said. Had a profound fabric on America, and Willie Mays at 93 lived such a meaningful and purposeful life, and it's definitely fitting that we would be here on Juneteenth celebrating his life and his legacy, his accomplishments, and the things that he has done specifically for America. Black people opened up a lot of doors and crossed a lot of barriers. So I just wanted to celebrate his life today and recognize him for the great man that he is. So welcome to the People's Voice. I'm excited. Today we have a guest fresh out of the elections. You know, it's been a long, we've been here. It's been like a few weeks since we've had our last show. And gosh, so much has happened. So much has gone down. We have our primary elections in the books. So many other things going on, not just here in DC, but across the world. Happy Juneteenth. So many celebrations today. It's just a great Wednesday, or as some people like to say, hump day. So I don't want to delay anyone. A lot of people are looking forward to hearing from our special guest, the great Ebony Payne, and I don't want to delay it. So just want to introduce her and bring her. We're going to watch this next video, and right after that, you will see the beautiful Ebony Payne. Also, just I need to always say this. It's okay for you to leave questions and comments. We welcome it.
And I'm running and I'm running for Ward 7 DC Council. I grew up here, and the streets today are worse than at any point in my life. Crime and carjackings are out of control. People are even stealing our dogs. Enough is enough. When I'm elected, if you hurt or kidnap a dog, you're going to jail for a long time.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, welcome, Ebony. Welcome. How are you?
I'm great. Happy Juneteenth. Thank you
Happy
for
June-
having me.
It's definitely a pleasure, especially fresh out of this Ward 7 race. What a season it was, right?
Yes, it was very exciting. Yes, it felt very long, the longest 6 months of my life for sure.
Well, I'm quite sure it was. How do you feel? Do you feel tired? Do you feel how do you feel after this long season?
Oh gosh. Well, I guess I feel good. I can't really say I feel tired. Maybe a little bit of residual, like I finally got a chance to catch my breath. I think I was running on adrenaline the whole time. So now that the race is over, I finally have been able to just rest and get my free time back and, have, taken just a pause. I mean, luckily, all of our summer recesses for like ANC have kicked in. And so it's been, it went from being extremely busy every single day and waking hour to just, quietness. And so I'm happy for that.
That's good. That's good. That's good. Did you feel the need to take a mini vacation? Go out of seas or something, go overseas or something?
We did, yes. In fact, that was going to happen, regardless of the result of the election. And so we did, get out of town immediately after the results came in. So that was nice. It's still like a privilege to do that. And so, it's not lost on me that, I was able to do that. And traveling is definitely one of my biggest passions. And, and so, that's something I'm looking forward to getting back to now that I can.
So let's just get straight to a few things. Give you a chance to clear some things. Throughout this election, there has been a constant theme that you were not a part of Ward 7 and you didn't want to be a part of Ward 7 and all of this is brand new and what's going on? So what do you have to say to that?
So it's interesting because I feel like there was a lot of chatter online and social media, and there was a certain narrative playing out on social media, but I'm not on social media. So a lot of those like comments I didn't actually see. I would just hear about it secondhand. I think that I knew going into the race that living west of the river was going to come up. But my community had been a part of Ward 7 for practically my whole life. When we moved into Kingman Park in 1999, we became part of Ward 7 in 2001, I believe, or 2000. So it was like as soon as we moved, we became part of Ward 7. And we existed for a long time as the only community west of the Anacostia River. And I never really was aware of living west of the river until redistricting happened. And then that became such a big deal. But I never grew up with like a negative connotation of Ward 7. And so I never felt like I didn't want to be a part of Ward 7. In fact, quite the opposite. During redistricting, the last redistricting cycle in 2020, I fought to keep Kingman Park in Ward 7. And that was in spite of a lot of my neighbors who would have preferred to go to Ward 6, because you get better treatment in Ward 6. And I think that's a reality of our city. And for a lot of people that didn't want to go to Ward 7, that those were sentiments that I always felt were pretty short-sighted. Um, so if that narrative was playing out, it wasn't coming from me. I've always, been on the record of being proud of Ward 7 and wanting to stay a part of Ward 7. Um, and we've spoken about, you grew up in Potomac Gardens, which
Yeah.
is the Anacostia River as well. And, I think you would be probably best to understand my perspective of, like, just because you live west of the river doesn't mean that you're living in the laps of luxury, or that you come from even a middle class background necessarily. And so, my community is right off of Benning Road. And so a lot of the same struggles that people in Ward 7 experience, and people east of the river experience, a lot of that is the same, struggles, that I experienced growing up. Um, my family was poor. I've experienced evictions, one eviction, when I was very little, but those experiences have a lasting impact on you.
Mhm.
And so, you know, it definitely was frustrating that it felt like, despite those experiences and despite me not really living in a, you know, not coming from like a middle class background, it still felt like people were focused on like the geography and the technicalness of where I was coming from instead of like my overall lived experience. Um, and I often wondered if
That
perhaps,
part was interesting to me. Your overall lived experience, because you talked about not necessarily being one of the ones who graduated from an Ivy League college. You went through
Mhm,
vocational training,
mhm,
and you became an entrepreneur, which seems to
mhm,
me to fit more of the average person today,
mhm,
rather
mhm.
than the other way around. So I was kind of shocked myself that you were looked at as this other person. I don't know. It was interesting for me.
Yeah, it was one of the reasons I felt the need to run, because when I got into the race, I was told, that I didn't go to college and that I didn't have the resume and that I shouldn't even try. And I was like, I'm so tired of hearing that line of thinking. And, especially for this generation coming up, where they've watched our generation take on a lot of student loan debt. And I feel like the path that I took straight out of high school, which was to go the vocational route and I went to massage therapy school, and I had a wonderful 10 years of practicing massage therapy. It totally changed my life. And I feel like that message needed to be told, and that story would resonate. And I think that even though we didn't win the election, we came within just a few hundred votes shy, and that was with no like large endorsements or really any support from the establishment and the old guard. And I think that my message really resonated with a lot of people in Ward 7, um, in spite of all of that. So I feel like there was the chatter online that I never really saw. It's important for me, like, especially when you're running a race, that you not get distracted by negativity in online spaces, because like I would hear about the negativity, but whenever I would meet someone in person, the the interaction would be so much more positive and excited. Like people were excited to meet me, and so I never really felt. I won't say I never felt any negativity, because that's not true either. But when it came to meeting voters and meeting people at the door, people really responded with a lot of excitement. And a lot of people have told me that like, they felt inspired by my campaign. And so if I inspired anybody in even just like a small way, then to me it was very much worth it.
Well, I think it definitely was an inspiring campaign. I also think it, if people really want to be real, people should start taking notes. um, because you had, like you said, no political background. You don't have the namesake in the city. You didn't have the namesake city. And your political strategy was genius.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
um, there, I mean, that can't be argued with. The numbers are what the numbers are. I will say this. I do need to apologize because on our flyer, it did say that you finished in second place. And I did not know at the time, but there was another release of the final count. And so from my understanding, you finished in third place. Behind, was it 2 votes behind?
Yeah, I have a story about that too. So yes, there was 2 votes, and so that was you know, when the first initial results came out, I was in second place, and then and actually the numbers, I'm not sure if they've certified the results yet, and so the numbers could still be in flux, but I'm not exactly sure. I think they stopped counting on December, or not December, but June 14th. Um, so, it's about voter apathy and what people think of voting generally. So there was a narrative that there wasn't a lot of participation in this election. But what I found is like, I had been fighting very hard, obviously, for RFK. That was one of my one of the big pieces of my platform. And there's a skate park on the RFK campus, and I had been fighting really, really hard to get the skate park media attention, and trying to fight to keep it, because I had spoken to a lot of kids at Eastern, and they were really passionate about the skate park and its importance in keeping them away from drugs and gun violence. And so I don't have children and I don't use the skate park, but nevertheless, I'm the ANC commissioner for the campus, and it's important that I'm like using my platform to like lift up issues that I think are important and are important to the community. And I was knocking on doors in Rosedale, and it was early vote happening. And I saw 2 gentlemen who were walking their strollers, and they had skateboards, which at first I didn't even realize that they had skateboards. But I just went up to them and gave them my information and was like, this is early voting. Can you please vote for me? Like the voting center is like a couple yards away, literally. And they were like, "Oh, we don't vote. We know who you are because we've seen you at the skate park, but we're just not interested in voting." And
Mm.
when those 2 votes came out, and I went from second place to third, I thought of those men, and I was like, people always think that like their vote doesn't count. You know, there's like a very defeatist attitude in
Yes.
the electorate, like, oh, nothing ever changes. I vote and still nothing changes. And I just thought, like, you know, you knew who I was, you knew I was fighting for something that your family uses, and you couldn't do the something that was free. I mean, it literally costs you nothing to vote. It doesn't even cost you postage to vote. But you won't take that small step towards change. You think it's just going to like change on its own. And so, I bring that story up because to me it was like indicative of, I think, where America is in general in terms of, you know, voter apathy and our jadedness with the lack of progress. I think people are like expecting change to come from like the top down, and they just really don't see that it really is only going to come from them. And so, you know, the numbers are what they are. I feel like I tied for second place, or, you know, and again, I had no support from the establishment. We did get one endorsement. It was the DC Voters for Animals, and then of course we had a lot of members of Congress that like really, saw something in me, and I'm grateful for that. And a lot of them, some of them actually lived within Ward 7, or they had staff that lived in Ward 7, and they liked that I was focused on crime. Or they were going to be impacted by RFK and the changes, and so that was interesting. So I think that my takeaway just from where the numbers are wasn't so much like the placements, and who really it was only whoever got first place, that was that was all that really mattered. But what I took away, and just like those two votes was just the apathy amongst the electorate. And I even had someone from my team who had met a woman who was very excited about my campaign and just really liked me, but she wasn't even registered to vote. And I think about that, and I just think about how many people are out there that were following and like cheering from the sidelines, and maybe they thought I had it in the bag. Maybe they thought, like, because they saw the signs everywhere, they just thought like, oh, she's gonna win, I don't have to like go and vote for her, but she's gonna win. Like, that's not really how it works at all. I didn't graduate from college, but I did take a few college classes, and I remember one class in particular, it was pharmacology. I was starting to study herbalism, and I wanted to take a pharmacology class just to learn about drug interactions. And, I was just in that time period in my life. And there was a girl in my class who, I remember there was like a primary going on, and I had like an I voted sticker on, and I asked her, if she had voted, and she was like, ugh, no, I would never vote. She was like really proud that she didn't vote. And prior to that, she was complaining about her student loans. And I was like, what is the purpose of complaining? Like, why are you complaining? But you won't do the very first thing that's required for change. Like, I really don't think people understand that they have, if nothing else, you have the one piece of power
That
you have.
That kind of brings us into the next question. Yeah, and that kind of brings us into the next question of ranked choice voting. Do you think that because of our voter participation and what's going on, and because of the final numbers, our winner had less than 20% of the vote, do you think that ranked choice voting should be here? And do you believe that it would have made a big difference for you?
That's a good question. So that question came up a lot because we have Initiative 83, which would bring ranked choice voting and semi-closed primaries where it would allow independents to vote in the election. And we got asked often at forums if we were a yay or a nay on Initiative 83. I was one of the only Ward 7 candidates that said yes. And I really had to think about it because, I had never really thought about it before. But ranked choice voting, you know, yeah, I think that it would be helpful. I mean, all of the arguments that I've heard against it always sounded like, oh, it's going to make it harder for me to win a re-election. And I didn't feel like that was a reason to not be for it. After the results came in and we had lost, one of my supporters, she was really heartbroken. And she had said that she had been talking to a neighbor who had voted for one of like the lesser candidates who had like only gotten a couple hundred votes, but they liked me, and they were really sad that they felt like they had wasted their vote. And she was like, and that's what ranked choice voting would have done. Like, she could have voted for her first choice, but then she could have also voted for me as her second choice. And would that have made the difference? Maybe. There's some people that feel like it would bring more confusion. I don't know if I'm really buying that argument. I think most people understand that you just rank your top 5, and it might take a little bit longer to count the votes, but most people understand a ranked system. And also, it's been celebrated in other parts of the country, like Alaska. Ranked choice voting brought us our first Native American elected official for Alaska, and that was something to celebrate. So it never really made sense why, if it was good for Democrats in other states, why it would be suddenly bad for Democrats in DC. And then with independents, I met a lot of independents on the campaign trail, and I actually felt like it would have been easier for me, because I did have a lot of independents switch their party affiliation to Democrat just so they could vote for me. But that was a very heavy lift. And I felt like it would have just been easier. Most independents are leaning to the left anyways in DC. So I don't have that fear of like, oh, it's the Republicans that are going to come in and like try and influence things. I found independents to be just very critical thinkers, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. One guy told me he was an independent because he didn't want to get the mail, and he didn't, which I thought was an interesting reason for being an independent, and maybe sophisticated, actually. So everybody kind of had their reasons for being independents, but it didn't mean that they weren't paying attention, or that they didn't want to participate. But they had their reasons. And now in the country, we've got like 44% of Americans are independents now. And I think that that is something that the Democratic Party should really pay attention to, because, there is a reason why people don't feel represented. And so the only thing that they can do is just become independent. And I think that people will switch their party affiliation if they feel like they have someone to vote for. They're not going to switch their party affiliation, because they're trying to vote against something. They're going to switch it because they want to vote for something. So I think, finding candidates that are inspiring is something that's important. The candidates need to reflect something in the electorate. And I think that's what I was able to do, in spite of the whole west of the river, whatever you want to call it, a controversy, or, it felt like that was the only thing that people could really ding me on. Like my message, we were talking about, a lot of things. We were talking about crime. We were talking about food deserts. We were talking about RFK.
I got to interject. There was one other ding, a common ding on your campaign, and I would like to, I'm sure the people actually would like to hear your response. People feel like you ran somewhat a negative campaign. People feel like this is a divided ward, and they feel like a few mailers may have been negative about opponents. It was really, it was widely, what's the word, repeated and played. The recording was played when you said that you felt like the leadership was mediocre and lazy. That was definitely made a big deal out of. And so that was the second thing I know as far as what I've heard on your campaign. Do you feel like you ran a negative campaign and a divisive campaign?
Well, you know, to be honest with you, it seemed like people would just hear what they would want to hear, and then they would not hear anything else. So, like, the mediocre comment was said at the Ward 7 Dems forum, and I said that there were a lot of lazy people in government. So, and it's funny because I got a text yesterday from one of my supporters. It was a secondhand. Somebody was like, "Oh, my girlfriend just texted me. Where's Ebony Payne? I've been sitting on hold with one of the agencies for like an hour now." And so there was two. People looked at that comment in two different ways. It was like, one was, "Oh my God, I can't believe she said that," like pearl clutching. And then there were people that were like, "Well, where is the lie?" And I think that like sometimes the truth hurts. And sometimes we hear things that we don't, they didn't want to hear. I mean, nobody wants to hear that they're mediocre. But as somebody who's been living in DC in Ward 7, yeah, like it's very frustrating, even just as a commissioner in Ward 7, to deal with, DC agencies and constantly feel like we're given like second hand and second class treatment as a ward. So, as someone who's running, I, and even in my own community, like, providing really good, what I would call as an entrepreneur customer service, right? It's constituent services in politics, but really going above and beyond for your constituents, and making them a priority. I don't see that happening for Ward 7. And if calling that out is considered negative, then it's like, well, sometimes you need negative feedback to be better.
Absolutely.
The last,
What Judy just said, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. I agree.
I mean, I feel like it made the other candidates work a little harder, yeah, so, and then like the negative, I got a lot of negativity too. It was like a lot of, like at the Ward 7 Dems forum, I was a little taken aback by the hate that was really directed towards me. Because again, I wasn't in those online spaces. And so I just don't really care about about comments on the internet. But so, to be in person and have a lot of hate directed towards you, I don't come from a political background anyways. I'm a former massage therapist, so like that is not the energy that I'm really like accustomed to. I'm actually accustomed to everybody like enjoying my company and like being happy to see me. And so a lot of the negativity, one, we were running a strong campaign, and I think that was threatening to a lot of people. A lot of people showed up who were already supporting other candidates. And so they were angry. And there was definitely a like, how dare you run? how dare you like think that you're qualified to run for this office, and like who do you think you are, and where did you come from? You don't live on the right side of the river. Like, you know, they didn't want to hear anything about the food desert, or you know, I was talking a lot about domestic violence. That like the media never picked up anything like that. It was all like, oh, she thinks government employees are lazy. And what they didn't talk about was the first part of that sentence. I said, you know, I had talked to a woman who was on the brink of homelessness because her apartment unit that she had a voucher for wasn't inspected on time. You know, so like your laziness has impacts on other people. And
Yes,
so,
yes.
you know, it is actually a very serious thing.
Mm.
And I like, again, it's like, you know, you can be upset about the about, you know, the comment and about the negative feedback, you know, or you can rise to the occasion and realize that, you know, do something more than just push papers around all day, because there are people who are really impacted by, you know, doing or not doing your job.
So speaking of rising to the occasion, my co-host, he's having some technical difficulties. He apologizes for not being able to
No
stay
worries.
online. But he did want to ask, do you plan on having a recount?
No, because no, we had thought about it. We were waiting to see like how the numbers were going to work out, but there's not enough votes out there. I know my supporters are so, like, a lot of them were so heartbroken with the results because it was so close. And you know, I think the campaign was really inspiring to a lot of people, and they were like, "Ugh, is that it?" And I was like, yeah, that's it. That's the game. That's how it works. You know, you know, I've had a lot of people ask me like, what's next? And I'm still, you know, thinking about what's next. You know, and I'm open to like ideas. So, you know, we'll see, you know, we'll see. But this race has been decided. And so, you know,
The race has
that's
been
just how
decided.
yeah.
Councilman elect. I'm from church, so we like to use that elect word. But councilman elect.
Well, he's the Democratic nominee.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go with that. He's a Democratic nominee.
He'll become elect after the general. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to get really tough.
If an independent or Republican defeats him, I will be very, very surprised. But yeah, the Democratic nominee is Felder. Ward 7 clearly is not on the same page with one another. We are divided. There's a unity breakfast actually coming up. I hope to see you there actually.
So I'll be sending someone. I have a bodybuilding competition that day. So I'm still competing.
Hey, body. That was a subject during the campaign. It definitely was.
Yeah, and you know, I knew going into it, I knew all of it would come up, and I was like, it's still important to run anyways. Again, talking about rising to the occasion. Also, I just don't feel like it's like anything bad, you know.
Right. It's not.
It's not. Yeah.
It was.
In fact, the woman who inspired me to get into bodybuilding, she's it's Ernestine Shepherd. Some people may know her because she's from Baltimore, and so she's like a local star. And she started bodybuilding at the age of 55, and she became the oldest. She broke the Guinness Book of World Records and was the oldest bodybuilder. I think she was 75 when she broke that record. And so, you know, I was like, if she can get up there in a bikini at 75. like here I am, like in my 30s, like I can get
You
up
can
there
do
on stage, and do it. Yeah. And it was an opportunity to talk about strength training and health, and fitness. And Ward 7 has a lot of health disparities.
it.
And so I actually felt like it was going to be something interesting and different, and something that people, if it inspired somebody to pick up a weight and and get stronger, then to me that was, again, it was worth it to do. And I actually have had a couple of people who are like, they're interested in bodybuilding, or just like getting healthier in general, and to me that's like very important, is to inspire people in that way.
Awesome, awesome. So yes, back with the whole moving forward theme. For one, I do want to recognize my buddy Elder Ray, who's online. It's good. Thank you for supporting the People's Voice, and also my big sis Judy. She did want to
Yes.
let you know that she's a certified domestic violence advocate, and she would
Yes.
love to connect. So I know you don't get on
Likewise.
social media too much, but I'll definitely make sure that you two connect with one another. I'll connect
Yeah.
you two together. Um,
Great.
but voter participation, you said was not where we would like it at. We definitely know that. Um, how do you plan to keep your network that you have engaged? Obviously, you built a network. You built as we like to say in politics, you built a brand, a following.
Mm.
So how do you plan to keep them engaged? How do you plan to add more voters? Do you plan to come on out and maybe host some voting drives? And this is about to be 4 questions all in one, so I'm gonna give you time to answer all of them. They're all in the same theme, and my buddy Chris is texting me some questions that he has for you. Um, and then my question is, along with that line, is we were talking about the unity. Will you commit to working more to bring more unity for Ward 7? Will you commit to being more involved? I remember when I ran for mayor, a great inspiration to me. Um, one of a guy named Ed Lazier, um,
Oh, yes.
um, who's well known in DC. And one of the things he said after it was all over, he said, "So many people run, and then you don't hear from them anymore." He said,
Mm.
"Stay involved, stay committed, stick with the fight." And I responded, "I promise that I'm not going anywhere." I've tried to keep. I hope that I've kept that word to my best ability. But do you plan to stay involved, even if you don't run necessarily for office again? You're already a commissioner. Do you plan on running to be reelected as a commissioner? Do you plan on staying involved and doing more for the city and for Ward 7?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I do plan on staying involved. I've had a lot of people really ask me to not go away, and I can see how people who lose office would do that, because anytime it's a loss, it's definitely hard, and it's like campaigning is extremely tiresome and hard work, and so then when you feel like it didn't pay off, and then also it can be very ugly, and it reveals the side of people that you're like, God, I really wish I hadn't seen that side of you before. um so but in spite of all of that, you like you said, you build a network of supporters, and so that network has really encouraged me to keep going. One thing I would like to see happen is, I'm always encouraging people to run for commissioner. I think that's like a really important way to serve your community and get your hands dirty and experience in how our city government works. And I'm always telling anybody that I meet, especially a lot of women, they often need to be asked multiple times. I had to be asked 5 times before I said yes to being a commissioner. And then once I finally said yes, I was like, gosh, I'm so glad that I decided to do that, because I learned so much about DC and about Ward 7 and about how to serve and how to be a good public servant to my community. And I think that encouraging other women, they have to be asked multiple times. It's like you can't just ask once, because I think for a lot of women, like, they're not necessarily seeing themselves as being able to, maybe they're just not seeing themselves reflected. I think like that speaks to just the kind of messaging that women are often fed in politics and just like life in general. So it takes a lot of asking. Plus, it's an unpaid position. And so if they've got kids, then it makes it that much more difficult. But I definitely want to see a continuation. And even just my supporters, I do hope to connect with them. And a lot of people have been asking me, like, what comes next after this. I do think I'll run again for commissioner. I feel like that would be kind of unfortunate if I just like ran this really, intense, like it was an intense campaign. And then to just like dump everybody, that doesn't feel right either. And so
Right.
just for the continuity of stability, like community stability, to me, it makes sense to run again. And I find being a commissioner to be rather easy. I mean, even though like dealing with district agencies isn't easy, but dealing with people to me is not hard. And
Yeah.
I something I would find interesting on the campaign trail is, because I wasn't a politician, and even like my definition of a politician is like they get paid. And so I don't consider myself a politician, because I just, I'm just a public servant. I'm doing this in service to the public. I'm
Right.
not getting paid. I'm not on any taxpayer dime. Like, if anything, I'm spending my money to serve.
Right.
And so, that's a very different dynamic. And when I was campaigning and wanting to like become a politician, my approach with people would be I would ask them a lot of questions. And part of that is because I came from a therapist background, where like that's what you do. You ask you ask people questions, and you need to know something a little bit about their lives, where their kids go to school. I would always ask people, where did they do their grocery shopping? That was a really important question for me to ask. And that would surprise people. People would be like, wait a minute, I thought I was supposed to be asking you the questions, because you're wanting my and I would be like, well, I want to have a conversation so that I know how to help you, in the
Right.
future. um, that was important, and that was something that a lot of people weren't used to. And I think that helped. you know I think that resonated with people. It was like, for the very first time, there was somebody who was running for office that wasn't just giving them a sales pitch. It was like
Yes.
somebody who was really interested in them and helping them. And that was something really different for a lot of people to experience.
Yes. So I really, really appreciate you taking the time out to come online with us. You actually sound like a very good candidate to join the rising voices of politics. So we definitely need to talk about that more.
Okay.
I look forward to fighting you some more on this Commander Stadium.
Oh, great. It's so funny because, yeah, like So I'm opposed to the NFL stadium and all of that, but I had a lot of supporters that were actually for it, and I always really appreciated them because it was like, they saw that I was just trying to fight for the community's voice, and that's not necessarily kind of you want that at the table. Um, yeah, I mean that's very interesting because um, there were some people that were like, "Well, I want the stadium, and so I'm not voting for you." And I was like, "Well, but I have a lot of supporters that are for it, and they're still supporting me." So it's like, all opinions are really welcome. Um, I think that again, going back to that analogy of the skate park and like how the people that could vote and didn't, you know, are like potentially going to lose, out on that. Hopefully, I raised enough awareness and alarm that, going forward during negotiations, that will maybe be, maybe that skate park won't stay, but maybe they'll replace it. I did my best, to raise awareness of it and to do what I could do so that it would stay or at least, be replaced. Uh, but I found it interesting that like at least I always wanted people to feel confident that they knew where I stood on issues, even if they didn't agree, they
Right.
knew where I stood. That was important. So to me, I'm like, tell me why you're for it, and I'm still going to be a listening ear. We might not completely agree, um, but it doesn't mean that I'm closed off to those opinions either.
Right. Right.
I think if more
Okay.
people had
So
that like mentality, like you're not necessarily going to agree 100% of the time with all of your, with an elected official, and you're not supposed to. Like there's supposed to be, you know, variation in thought. But I will also say that my opposition to the stadium, I feel, is what really I knew it was going to cost me in the end because when the big money moves, that plot of land was just too valuable. Um,
do you
and
think that
so
cost you? Do you honestly think that is what cost you in the end? Do you think that you were not winning this race before other council members
Mhm.
endorse Wendell? Do you think those endorsements pushed him over the edge? It seemed to make a big difference at the end. So do you think that
Mhm.
your opposition to the field made more of a difference, or it was
Yes,
the endorsements?
both. I think that so when the results were first turned on and I was leading in the early vote, right? So we were leading the early vote, and that was like the first 2 weeks of the election, right? Like they'd mailed out the ballots, and we were leading. And then you could really see there was like a panic going on behind the scenes. And I think a lot of people in the electorate probably, how would you know unless you're really on the inside? But as a candidate, word gets around very quickly. And there was like a panic because I was leading. And people knew that. There were special interest groups that were doing polling and that had endorsement power, and they could see that we were leading. And so it was like, uh-oh, like this candidate who, you know, doesn't want the stadium, and like there's a lot of legacies tied up in, just a lot of very powerful people with a lot of money, want politicians that they can control. And so, when it's a plot of land that large, yeah, like there's there's interest in that. And I was surprised actually at how late they decided to try to influence the election. Um, and I think that's another thing I really took away from the whole experience is a lot of people think that it's just politicians that get influenced by money in politics, but it is also the voters. And that's something I only realized after running for election. Um, and so in the last 2 weeks, you could see, like, once the endorsements happened, then that's what was able to push um, Felder over the top. And you can just see, based off of, like, it was big business um, that had an interest in the future of RFK. And um, I do think that yes, like, just because I know from conversations of people who um, you know are in meetings with you know city leaders and leadership, and it was like, there was a panic. I was the candidate to beat. And and I knew that going in. I knew that was going to happen. I was even a little shocked at how late, um if those endorsements had happened earlier, it's possible that I don't know what the results would have been like. But
You could have
it might
rebounded.
not have. Well, I don't know. I don't think it would have. No, not necessarily. I think it would have probably hurt us even more. I think a lot of people had already voted. Um,
Mm.
I'm not sure if it would have been as close as it turned out to be. Um, you know,
The
and the
last
other
two
thing
minutes,
about uh-huh.
you can finish too, but the last 2 minutes, I just want you to just say what you want to leave the people with. I'll let you close out the show and end the show for these last 2 minutes.
Um, well, what was that? Let's see. Well, it must not have been that important because it's escaped me now. But I think I would just leave people. Oh, it was about, like, the outside DC dollars, and how that was like that that the media kind of, like, latched onto that. And I think what I would explain to people is, like, all of that outside money was $50 or less. And so that is not enough to really, like, there's no legislative kickback that is expected for, like, a $50 donation or a $10 donation. Like, the most you owe those people is like a thank you card, right? But when you have special interest groups that are paying, in one instance it was like $190,000, $30,000. There is something expected on the other side of that money. And so when I say that people don't realize that they are also impacted by money in politics, like, their perception of the candidate is also impacted by money in politics. I mean that in the sense of, not necessarily, doesn't necessarily mean all the time, but you're, like, I never really understood until this election how important mail was. And just being able to communicate with the voters. If you don't raise the money, you can't get your message out. And so a lot of really great candidates who have great ideas and a great platform can't get their message out. And so they're never really given an opportunity to have their message and their platform heard. And so, that might not be another argument for ranked choice voting. But I would just leave people with, that it is very important to vote, and that your vote does in fact count. And it counts even more at the local level. I almost feel like we spend a lot of time worrying about what's happening on the national stage when there's not really much you can impact nationally, but you can have a major impact locally. And so I would encourage people to really stay engaged and involved at the local level, and really just pay attention to what's happening.
Summer. Get ready for summer. It's nothing like summer. I've been cooped up too long, I just wanna be free. The summertime is calling me. Cruising riding around downtown in DC. The forecast said the temp will be 80s all week. Now if you feel like I feel, then you know what I mean. When I say we're long overdue for hitting them scenes. Everything's just better in the summertime. I'm feeling fine, I'ma live my life. Summer is the season. Summertime. Cruising the street, shooting the wind. Ladies look so pretty. Take it easy, just live it. Now all the ladies looking pretty, drinking mimosas, accidentally, head done, nails did, just cutting up in the city. Fellas driving Hot Wheels, old schools made of steel, motorcycle, dirt bike, muscle cars, chrome rims. You can taste the air, tastes like summer. When good times just seem much funner, weather just better.